Hi, I'm Vaughn Lauer and was invited by Kerri, Perez to participate in an interview and discussion hosted by Decoding Dyslexia of Florida on Wednesday, October 21st. The title was Dyslexia, Assessments, and Making Sense of Test Scores. Unfortunately, Zoom crashed and we lost the introductions. Sue Lasko, president of Decoding Dyslexia Florida, had just introduced Kerri Perez, owner of Helping Hands Advocacy. Kerri then introduced me, leading the interview, discussion, and joining in the presentation of the Special Education Decoder System. I want to note that contact information for all three of us will be found at the end of this session. Zoom didn't do a perfect job, but you won't miss any of the interview questions or discussion, nor the presentation of the Special Education Decoder System, a program tool for making sense of school and private evaluations. We begin with Kerri Perez asking me the first of several important questions about dyslexia, assessing for dyslexia, and much more.
As you're aware, October is Decoding Dyslexia Month, and we wanted to ask you, well, wanted to ask you some important questions about dyslexia. So, knowing that dyslexia is the most common disability seen, what would your definition of dyslexia be?
It's probably similar to many and a little bit different to just as many, but let's start with the International Dyslexia Association. And I'm not going to read it, but they look at dyslexia as a specific learning disability. And under IDEA, that's where you'll find the word dyslexia with specific learning disability. But the definition itself doesn't go far enough in explaining the components of dyslexia, like most definitions. I mean, if I said autism, it's basically communication, it's not enough information. So then I look at the essential components of reading, and I think that's where it gets operationalized, and that's what we look at or look for when we're trying to get a definition and understanding of what dyslexia is. So we're looking at phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and spelling. And it doesn't mean to me that a child has to have all of those components to qualify under dyslexia. Sometimes I wonder if that's where the difference is. What I tell parents, and I'm backing up here, don't get in a war with the school so that you have to have the word dyslexia there, because it's those components of reading which do define dyslexia that you have to then have to explain what dyslexia is. So focus on those in the assessments and build your IEP based on those, not on the word dyslexia. Did that make sense?
It does. So with that, how important is it for parents to understand, the evaluation that's coming from the school? Like you just said, don't stress on it being a diagnosis of dyslexia, right? It
Right.
could be an SLD in the area of reading. What is important for the parent to look at in those evaluations?
That's a really good question, because it further expands on what I'm talking about. What we're looking for in the evaluation is for parents to understand, and maybe I'm jumping a little more widely here, but if let me do it this way. The problem with reports, and I went through this too, way back when, and then for a long time, and I've been doing this for years, and it really is that the reports themselves are not clear. And I think what's important too is because they're not clear, they're not written for you, they're not written for me.
Then who are they written for?
They're written for other professionals. And so you've got that vocabulary that's so high. And so the first thing is ask questions. That's always the rule. Ask questions until you understand. But I think because I'm sorry, I've got three thoughts here. because the reports, somebody you can talk over you because you don't understand what the components of the report mean. That's what I'm really trying to say. I think without having the definition and knowing that it can be a learning disability, and not to get upset if they say, well, it looks like he has a learning disability, but to know what those examples, 6 examples that I gave, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, look for the tests that measure those, and then look for the words that help explain them. The problem, though, is the reports are hard to understand. I think that's my major message today, that they are difficult to understand, but they can be understood.
So they
And I
should be
make,
in crayon, correct? I've heard you term that crayon. And what you mean by crayon is not, you know, a kindergartner writing it in crayon. Crayon meaning simple, simplistic language so that anyone picking it up would be able to understand it.
Yeah.
Minus a little bit of Googling to find out what words mean.
and you can spend a lot of time trying to figure those things out. And yeah,
Correct.
crayon is in simple language, something that can be understood. And reports aren't that, not all reports. I have seen a handful that are like, wow, these are really easy to understand. And in fact, you helped me out once, showing me one that I've been talking about for years. This is how a report should look. I've seen a few, and then you were kind enough to share.
And what was very important about that crayon report, it was a 30-page report. And when the doctor talked about, for example, attentional issues of, you know, under arousal, he actually gave an example of what that would look like in a child, not just in the classroom, at home and everything. So it was very important to be able to utilize that as an advocate, because I could show more information of what we know about the child and what services the child needs. So let's bring this to what are the common, I mean, since we are talking about dyslexia, like you said earlier, we could talk about autism, we could talk about all different disabilities, but what would your advice be to a parent as to what testing would be utilized?
And that's
common ones.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And years ago, when I started working online, I got to meet a lot of school psychologists, just like you do too, I'm sure. And I asked, what are the common tests? And in preparation, because just in case you asked, I have some notes here on that specific thing. And because I don't want to miss them. But what they gave me was pretty common for all. And one was a test of cognition. That's the very basic understanding of abilities and skills. And the WISC is the one that came up most often.
So those are considered IQ testing,
yeah,
correct? Educational equivalency.
I
know.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, you started to say something.
I just wanted to make sure that parents who are listening are aware that what you're talking about, the cognitive, is IQ testing.
Yes. The second test was the Woodcock test of achievement. And so we want to get some measure of abilities, reading, math, writing, spelling, things of that sort. The very things we talked about earlier under the reading, what are the areas we should be looking for? These tests are doing that. The third test
areas of reading, correct?
Say again, please.
The Woodcock-Johnson would be looking at the 5 areas of reading.
It would be looking at, it would be looking at some of them, but it does evaluate reading in a very general sense. But it also looks at math, because disabilities are not always pure. We can have attention deficit and autism and a combination of things.
So we should be looking at all suspectable disabilities.
That's what the law says, and yes. And
okay, so the third test, I'm sorry.
No, you're raising good points, and those issues are raised at the beginning before the school starts testing. You say, here are the areas of my concern. That's why those 6 points might be really, really important to say, I would like you to look at this, this, and this. You don't have to understand what they mean. You don't have to be an expert, but you can say this, this, and this. The other area is test is, and I'm closing people's videos because I'm trying to save. This is what you see me doing here. I don't know.
No worries. You can take
Oh.
a minute to adjust the tech. Yeah, I turned off the doorbell, so you're not hearing that anymore.
Yeah.
I did a real quick intro. My name is Sue Lasko. I'm with Decoding Dyslexia Florida. We're up to 80 people now. I think we have 100 max, and we've got a lot of new faces, so that's exciting to see. Just quickly, a couple of the questions. I know we're going to get to them at the end, but we'll kind of triage a few of these. Penelope from Connecticut was asking about category. And I think basically that's what Vaughn is saying, like, don't fight over calling it dyslexia or calling it a certain category. The ultimate goal is to get the appropriate services for your child. So whether they qualify, so basically dyslexia is not one of the 13 eligibility categories. So it would typically fall under SLD, and it is a SLD in reading. Not too many states have drop-down menus at this point to tell us, is the learning disability in the academic area of reading, writing, math, or all? Some kiddos might show up as the eligibility category of speech and language impaired, and some for OHI. So the point is, like, let's look at the specific needs and not get too bogged down on what we're calling it. So again, for dyslexia, we're typically looking at phonology, oral reading fluency, and those types of issues. We have a couple other questions that are a little bit more off on a tangent, so I'll save those for later and hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. That was very important clarification that needed. Like, we should not get stuck on the diagnosis. We should be focusing on the child's needs. So we had the Woodcock-Johnson.
Right. We start with the IQ test, then we look at achievement tests, but we also look at the phonological processing, which again was one of those. And the CTOP, this is why I wrote it down, comprehensive test of phonological processing, is perfect for assessing the phonological processing clearly. So CTOP is regularly used. Another is an option. It's called the CELF, C-E-L-F. It's the Clinical Evaluation of Language Fundamentals. We know that dyslexia is a language-based disability. So the CELF will look at more areas. It'll look at receptive language, expressive language, and other components. So we're not ignoring the fact that it's a language by not assessing that area. One of the others is called the GORT, G-O-R-T, and that's the Gray Oral Reading Test. And what it tests is speed and fluency. And the fluency was one of those areas that we mentioned earlier that's under reading. So here's an assessment for that. The last one isn't too regularly used, and I don't see it in every school evaluation, but it's the RAN/RAS, RAN/RAS, and it's the Rapid Automatic Naming Test. It's looking for processing speed. And what it does is looks at how fast the child can identify letters, numbers, colors, and objects. So now we're looking at processing speed in a number of ways, phonological issues, phonemes, and achievement, and the IQ test as a basis.
And that last that you mentioned for RAN is very important to oral fluency and reading rate. So yes, other tests that you mentioned, like the CTOP and the Woodcock-Johnson, would test for that as well, but it's not just a separate test. They have what you're trying to give parents is that you would recommend. So now when we have these recommendations and the school district does that comprehensive evaluation, right?
Yeah.
And we're looking at these test scores, and all we see is numbers, and all we see is mass confusion. How do I make sense of the test scores? So how can your decoder system make it make sense for the parents?
I love your questions, and I love your summative statements. They're right on target. Problem is, again, as we were talking earlier, Kerri, was that the ability to understand the tests, because they're not written, and the test scores. So what is important to know is, what is the purpose of that test? And you had mentioned that the report we were talking about, the test talked about what it measured and what impact they would have on any child.
Correct.
You want to eventually get into the report, what impact does it have on my child? But those first two things, what's this test about? What does this subtest measure? And what impact, if it's low, is it going to have on my child? You want ability to understand that. Reports aren't written that way, but you can ask. The other confusion part, and I'm kind of answering in a reverse of the negatives here, are the test scores themselves. And I've seen them, and I know you have, I know Sue has too, and a lot of our parents and participants today, where in the same test, they'll report scores of standard scores, scaled scores, and percentile ranks. And you're trying to figure out, what do these mean? How do I even compare them? Because they're totally different measures. That's
You
problematic.
need a degree on that, like a statistical degree on how to calculate those formulas.
Or you can have a chart that does the
Or could do it for you, right?
Or you can come see me or you or others to have the explanation. But as they stand, they can be very complicated. But there is a solution to this. And lastly, you want to see in a report a relationship between the test, the subtest, any recommendations, any conclusions that are drawn, and any recommendations that are made. And I say that because I've seen assessments, in particular, independent evaluations, because schools don't make recommendations, will be I have even seen 2-3 pages of accommodations, and you go, what is this? Well, and I'm serious, this one just scared me, and I may have shared that with you once before, but there was no relationship between those recommendations, accommodations, and the test scores. That's what you need. So if you have an understanding of the test scores, what they measure, what they're saying is impacting your child, then any recommendations made either at the IEP meeting or in an IEP will say, I'm recommending this because. That's pretty much how you write an IEP. I'm writing goals based on what I know of the child, based on data, whatever it might be. And I'm saying these are the services that need to be provided. But how do you get to that point?
How do you get to knowing, like you said, percentile, standard score? How do we know to convert it? And how do we know that we're utilizing all the testing? Like for the Woodcock-Johnson, I believe, I be off, but 30 to 40 different subtests in that. How do we know if it's comprehensive? How does your system help parents?
Well, it actually shows you a list of all the subtests, and you will know by using the system which ones weren't.
Okay.
We could move and take a look at that if you'd like.
I think this is a very important thing for parents to see, because then they'll get, I hope, aha, now that makes sense. And it takes before this program, I would take an evaluation, I would write it on a piece of paper, and then I would write all the test scores out in a piece of paper. And then that would take hours and days. And then if it was something I didn't know, I would go and say, okay, well, what is this subtest testing for? Google was my best friend. And I would look at all this information to see, what I could gain from it. But if I had it in a systematic way where I could see my child or even my children that I advocate for as a professional, where their highs are here, their medium skills are here, their lows are here, because it would make it so much easier to present it in that way. And from what I'm understanding of your system, which I'm a big fan of, it does that. Yeah. So would you please show us how it does that? And I'm very excited to show everybody this. Really, this is just an amazing opportunity to see this. So.
And to add to what you were saying, I did that too. And then we tried Excel, and that became very complicated. And then you'd be at an IEP meeting where the psychologist would pull up a paper napkin and draw a bell curve and say, well, here, and here. And by the time you got done, it was unreadable and it didn't help. So we sat down and said, the one thing that we need is to be able to understand data. in order to move forward on determining an eligibility or even determining what the areas of needs were. So I will show that to you now.
And to determine the present levels of performance as well.
Perfectly put. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to show you how simple the report is. It really requires you, one, we have to have the test in the system, and I would think we are approaching 65 or 70 different commonly used tests. But we have a drop-down menu, and you can search for them, or, and I'm going to do this real fast. Oh, I thought I was. There's the WISC we talked about. You see we have an older version and a newer. And I just picked the date that the test was given. And I add the test. The program works this fast. And what you see is the test name. But the very issue you just raised was, oh, what do I if I don't know how many subtests are in there? This program lists them all. Sometimes they're not all used, and that's fine because they might have measured that area someplace else. But once you see that it's missing in your head, you're saying, I might have to ask a question. Why didn't you, for example, evaluate comprehension? All right, so let's get to the real plus of this. What we've done is we know that the WISC can report scores as scaled scores, percentile, and standard scores. Standard scores are the ones we mostly understand. Think about an IQ average 100, that bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I'm
it's
picturing it.
96, 95. That's how it works. Scaled scores are 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me. I think we're having technical difficulties
Yeah,
with.
I think Vaughn is. You and I are actually good. He's frozen.
Okay.
There we
Sorry.
go, which just happened. Okay, he's gone. Hopefully he jumps back on. I think he's having technical difficulties because he mentioned he was yesterday as
So if
well.
you just give us a few minutes to get this technical difficulty situated, he will be logging back on shortly.
Yeah, and oh, there he is. You're back.
See? Okay.
You're muted though.
My heart stopped.
There you go.
Now let's see.
So
We
Vaughn,
did
this
go
is
from
my
91 to 83, so I don't know, maybe other people are having technical difficulty too. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm trying to see if anybody's here with us.
Oh yeah, we've got 83 people.
Okay, let me
Yeah.
read.
Do you want to go back to your screen share for the software?
Yes, I would like it to work.
Right.
I need to call it up, so just give me a second. It crashed too.
No worries. So while Vaughn is bringing up his decoder system, we were looking at a educational test of the WISC. We were looking at the different subtests of it, and we were about to put in some scores so we could see how this system does the magic for you. So you don't have to do what I was doing and getting a piece of paper and being a statistical major or a mathematician. This makes it easy where you could put in a scaled score, percentile, or a standard score, and it will convert it for you. As soon as Vaughn is ready to do that, he will show us.
Okay, I tried to, according to where I am, you should see the shared screen. Are you not seeing it?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, good. Well, in the process, it cleared everything we were doing, but you saw what it was doing for us, was doing that conversion like I said, I can send you the conversion chart. In fact, I think, Kerri, you have it as a backup.
Yes,
But it's cumbersome. And
it
then
is.
this is not. So that's as much work you have to put in. And as I said before, responding to your question, you notice in the test, they do processing speed and working memory, and these are important. And I'll explain them in a minute, but it's a starting point. So I'm going to go to, let's see. I'm going to go to a report that was completed, and I'm copy and compare two other functions we have here, so you can compare tests year to year to look at differences, which is a plus. But what I want to point out to you now is the Wechsler's black, the gray oral is in green, orange, and so forth. This comes in handy in the following first report.
Each test is a different color,
Yes.
and there's a reason for that, which we will see next.
Yeah, how do you separate black dots on a, okay, this is the first report, and it's very simply put, it shows the range of scores that this child obtained in each test. And you can just look and say, oh, 110 to 80. Immediately, because you know, this presents a problem. This young lady has very high skills, average skills, and very low skills. And that's just important to say, wow, I wonder if there's always a range of test scores or if they even out. The majority of people's test scores is somewhere around the 100 range, or they'll cluster on this end or they'll cluster down here. But this little girl, her range was very large.
So then when we're looking at the ranges, then we're looking, if the range is wide, then there's a possibility of a disability in that area that the test is testing.
Correct. So under the IQ, which is a many subtests, we know that she's got strengths in, well, picture concepts, whatever they are, similarities, whatever they are, vocabulary, but picture span, coding, digit span, block design are not so good. And that's what we see immediately here. But this is just a starting point. We look at the gray oral, we also see she's got a range. That's 35 points. That's significant. We look at the phonological processing, the CTOP, once again, from 110 to 65. We gotta be going, wow, she's got strength and she's got needs. And if I knew what these meant, I could start better understanding. This test doesn't give all the explanations. All right, let's look at achievement. And we see that she's way down on reading, written language, spelling. You know, these sound familiar to me. Oh yeah, that definition we were talking about of dyslexia and the areas of reading, she might be qualifying for that. Here's another test, the Wyatt. It's also achievement test, more subtests in it, 115 to 74. Holy cow. Now, what I can't do is remember what was up here.
You're looking at the scores, right? Numbers to me, but now I don't have to color it. I don't have to highlight the highs, the lows. It's already there for you. So that as an advocate, you could talk about, well, look at the areas that are listed in purple. They represent low average. Those are my areas of concern. So teacher, whoever is working with the child, do you see these areas? So then you're working on building those present levels of where the child is now. This is just amazing. So now, how do we're seeing the differences, we're seeing the weaknesses, which could correlate to a disability in an SLD, could be speech language, could be math, could be, but how do we utilize this? We could use this page, right? But how do we utilize it for a meeting? Is there more to this system?
There is. And I love how the phrases that you're using, right on right on target. Here's the difficulty with this format. I've got to look up here and then go, oh yeah, down here. Is there math subtraction? No, I've got to go up here. I can't use it for comparative purposes. It's very hard in this format, but it does exactly what you said. People go, whoa, I didn't realize the range of skills were all over. So here's what I think is the more important. Now we're down here. And I want you to know the system runs this fast as long as you don't crash.
So
Here,
this generated in like less than 5 seconds, all those little dots, which you're gonna explain, but it happened relatively quickly.
without a doubt. And so now you see the lowest test score and all of these tests. This is kind of this is all those test scores that we just looked at. Now you see how they fit on the bell curve. It's still not helpful in this format. And this is how people feel when they get the report. I'm just going to go to the end and see what I want the last chapter and see what it says without understanding all this other stuff. And I get that. So what we said
It
was,
is overwhelming for parents. I mean, for the untrained parent, it looks like a bunch of dots on a bell curve. What does that mean?
and I'm somewhat trained and I can't make heads or tails out of this. I mean, I do see if I run the cursor over, I can see what each one of these is. I can zoom in and see, but how do I use this? And what I'm going to show you, what we're going to do is remove tests from here. And we're going to remove the GORT.
Okay.
Start to disappear.
Now we're seeing less dots.
Mhm.
So you could do this test by test.
Yes,
Okay.
you can do test by test. You can get down to a test score from, all we're looking at now is the Wechsler, the IQ test. And we get an idea. She's got cognitive skills all over the place. I'm going to focus on one area for today's. We could look at every one of these, but I'm just going to look down here and I'm going to look at picture span. I'm going to look at coding and I'm going to look at digit span. Now, for those who know what this is, just hang on. But
Okay.
these are measures of speed and working memory. Do those ring a bell? And a
Yeah.
lot of people you go, yeah, that's exactly what the problem is. She can't do it quickly enough, and she doesn't have. She has issues with memory, but that's one test that's telling us that. Okay.
So just can you repeat the testing for this sample? We're looking at processing speed or working memory. What testing would be looking at that? You said
Good question. One of the tests that measures these
one of
areas
the
is
tests,
the WISC.
right?
That's why
On the whisk.
that's why I tell people put the IQ test in first. Then look at the processing test. So let's look at the GORT, which is processing speed and memory. If you know the
Okay.
GORT, you know what that is. We click here. And we go, she has problems being accurate when she reads things. I wonder why. Oh, fluency. Again, it's the rate that we talked about under the WISC. And doggone it, the GORT actually tests rate, that's the speed and accuracy, and says she's got a problem in this particular area. Now I've got two tests that are indicating issues with working memory and processing speed, which I've always suspected was a problem with this girl. I'm going to ask the phonological, it won't tell me. I'm going to add the phonological processing. Now look, I can look at everything that's up here, but I'm just focusing here for the time being. And I add, and I say, oh, there's some scores that landed in this area. I wonder what's here.
Word repetition.
Non-word repetition, again, is working memory and processing speed. Rapid, I can stop right there. Rapid is processing speed.
Mhm.
And rapid, I can stop simply. So now I've got three tests that are clearly saying this child has a weakness. I'm just focusing on processing speed and working memory. wow, they're clustering together and they're giving me a lot of information. It's kind of hard for somebody sitting over there to say, I don't think she has a disability. Because you're sitting here, no matter who you are, even a PE teacher can, you know how meetings require a general education teacher. Sometimes people will bring in a PE teacher just to meet the law, not the intent of the law, but the letter of the law. Even a PE teacher you can turn to, and you would. Do you see that she might be having a problem with processing speed and working memory? And the PE teacher says, look, that's not my area of expertise. Based on this, yeah, it looks to me like that's a weakness. Good. Let me show you more.
It's important to get everybody to agree that there is a weakness because it's a team decision. So if you're able to take this information of the processing speed and share this with the team, then there's no reason why the gym teacher, who's not a school psychologist, obviously, would be able to say, yeah, based off what you're showing, I see these issues. And also you're able to utilize this information a little further if you know the areas of weakness, the 5 areas of weakness for dyslexia, and you could say, well, I think my child has a reading disability. I think my child has a processing disability. That could be the reason why her or his reading ability is so low or below grade level. So this does the mathematical equations that used to take me weeks to do. I am not a math scholar, and this makes it so much simpler because then I can focus on those areas, right? And then I can say, well, does this look like dyslexia? Does it look like a math disability, dyscalculia? What does it look like a processing disability? Would it be an auditory processing disability? Let's look at those pieces. Let's look at the fluency, the oral reading rate, the comprehension. There's all different pieces to it that we can look at, and then we can peel it apart for, does it meet that criteria for one of the 13 categories? I love this. I think this is such an amazing thing, not just as an advocate, but for a parent, because it feels like you're giving the parent a leg up to being professional. Because they're always, well, we know better, school knows better, we know we're the professionals, parents, the outsider. This empowers the parents to be an equal team member.
I totally agree with everything you said. So what we have here, we're still not dealing with, is this dyslexia? What we have here is knowledge that there's at least one area of weakness, and it's repeated in these tests. We know the why part. Now, how is this impacting? This is where a report should be written. How is this impacting on my child? Well, let me show you first in the KTEA. This is another achievement assessment. All subtests were not used. And again, you can ask why, or if you look down below, you can see, and the school can say, we tested those areas under another test. But let's see now how
and that's
these.
Okay, Vaughn, right?
Pardon?
That's okay.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine, as long as the areas are tested. And you can use different tests than these too, but these follow along the lines. We're not using the rapid naming in this, but for the most part, it's a test we talked about. But let's see now how these impact on learning. Well, I see some dots showed up here. She's going to have problems with, we already knew this, spelling, because that's a word memory. Anything that says fluency is going to be a problem. And we're talking about reading problems. We're talking about written problems.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes this is just a matter of this girl needed more time to complete her work. But now we know the what. We know why there's a problem, and we know how it's affecting her. And let's see, I'm looking for red this time. Written expression. I'm not going to go into what that means, but yeah, for sure, written expression. So now we have several tests, several saying, here's the area of need, and it's going to impact her on writing, written expression, spelling, and we know that. Okay, that's why she's having problems in writing, reading, and so forth. Let's add the last test. You see they're all over here, but we're just looking in here. And again, now we have two achievement tests saying she's definitely got a reading problem and it's fluency, so she's not reading quickly. So, and these are real. I didn't make these up. These are real test scores that show how, and she has dyslexia, and she also has attention deficit. What ended up happening here is the parent who presented this with a little support, I say little support from me, took it to the room. She said, Vaughn, there was a PE teacher there. And so I asked everybody, what do you see in the classroom? Do you see a problem with her getting her work done? And they're saying yes and yes. And I asked the PE teacher, what do you think? And he said, it looks to me, not being my words, she said, I saw the aha moments from teachers going. And they came up to me and said, now I know what you've been talking about, because they can finally see it here. Not only that, she had been given extra time, but she hadn't been given any training on what to do with the extra time. And you know the kid I'm talking about. You take them out, you put them in the room, and they sit there and go, what am I supposed to do? Well, they realized what they had to teach her to use, what skills she needed to use that extra time for reading assignments. So,
And this would drive the intervention, or at least as the advocate perspective, when you're seeing these weaknesses, what, like you said earlier, is you need a goal for each weakness, right? Or each deficiency. And that would help drive the services of what the child needs as far as goals. And I was watching the chat and people are asking, can you do this for any test as long as it's in the testing system that you have?
Yes.
Okay. Can we do comparison from 2015 and then another one in 17 and then another one in 2020? Doesn't matter the dates, it will do a comparison for you. Like, let's just say we're trying to see the child has not made progress and we want to show that with these testing. It can compare multiple dates.
It can.
Okay.
We'll do a real fast one. You notice up here it says compare this to what? It has to be the same version. You can't use a WISC 2 and compare it to a WISC 5.
Okay.
For a lot of reasons.
So we're using the Gray
Laurel
Laurel 5th edition, one from one date in 2011, and then this child's had it redone in 2016. So,
and we can compare, but I want to show you this, that we can show or hide any test. You had talked about that before, and I hadn't shown that happens, so you can. And we can talk about comparisons. There are problems with compare. I don't think we have time to get into it. Why? I'm going to tell you, this is okay. I'm going to tell you that accuracy on the first test and accuracy at the second test are okay, but I can't explain why, because it takes a little bit. This child is actually making progress. Just, I personally can't explain it here. It takes 3 minutes.
it would take hours.
3 minutes and I can explain it to you. Oh, that's how that works. But to answer your question, you can do comparisons. Now imagine if you did the WISC with the 20-some tests and 20-some tests, it gets very cumbersome very quickly.
Yes.
But that's why you want to focus down and say, oh, let me see what processing speed was 3 years ago and where is she here today? Is she losing ground or making progress? So I can do that with any test.
And then I see you can print the page at any time.
Yes. Or you can simply save what you see here as a ping, as a graphic. So if you happen to be an advocate and you're working to write a report, you can. But this was really made, and that's the one point I'm making, and I think I'll stop talking. This was made to be shown on a screen to the whole IEP team, because it can be projected at the school. And I just lost it. Hang on, just give me a second. Oh, so mom is showing these test scores that we were looking at. The psychologist says, where did you get these? He didn't recognize they were test scores from the test he had done.
Really?
That was amazing. And he said, can I see your laptop for a minute? She said the whole meeting focus changed from their needs and mine to my child's. And so that's why the child got the services and so on and so forth. So
It gives
yeah,
the parent empowerment, I think, from your example of what you're saying. It gives the parent empowerment to be that equal team member, that equal person in collaboration with the team to say, these are the weaknesses, these are the strengths, this is where my child has progressed or not progressed. And it gives them, I love the fact that I don't have to do that math anymore. I love the fact that if I'm working with a client and I want to quickly compare last year's test, 2 years test difference, and then I can show this to the parent and I can just take a picture of it, right? Print out the page and put it in my report for my parent so that they can see.
You can go on Zoom and you show the parent live what this
You
is.
could do that, right?
And they can do that too.
Or
it will not make you a psychometrist, it will not make you a psychologist, but it puts you in a position to be able to ask now informed questions. Hey,
yeah.
How come there's no difference here? Is this good or bad? I would like to know. Why didn't you use this subtest? And it matters how you ask the question. I mean, you don't say, I knew it. I knew you were wrong. That's not how you approach it. There are always questions. Can you explain this to me? And once the team knows that that's your approach because you sincerely want to understand, things will change. And this gets into how you lead an IEP meeting. But it's
that
what
could
you
be
said. You
for
ask
another meeting.
everybody. You ask everybody their input. What do you see that she needs extra time? Do you see? And you told me, am I right? And now it's not just a psychologist and you.
Correct. It's the whole team effort. I would like to leave some time before we wrap up for some questions. I know Sue was monitoring the questions. Is there anything out there that is striking that you feel that we should start with, Sue?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit. I mean, there was some specific to the software. There was quite a bit on working memory, and that is something that's not super flexible. Kiddos might maintain a lower level of reading fluency, but we don't want to use these sorts of things as not give them the intervention that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody mentioned they have a 7th grader reading at a 3rd grade level. And is it too late? So I wanted to assure you that it is not. She can still improve.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, there may be some, dyslexia is lifelong. So there may be some issues with word retrieval and whatnot, and the oral reading fluency may never completely close, but she can still be successful. And someone had asked about how much improvement should be expected. Well, if you have someone with a learning disability, you are aiming for more than a year's growth in a year. I think that's the simple answer. If you're not getting that, you need to look at what the intervention is. And it's a long time to go by to, change gears.
Right.
The more specific questions on the software were cost. If they get it, can they share the data electronically? And also, if Clarice is here, if you want to think, we have people from Ohio, Tennessee, Nebraska. Clarice is with Decoding Dyslexia Nebraska. So if you're listening, I thought maybe I would unmute you in a bit in case there's any points that you think we might have missed that you might want to touch on.
Hi, Clarice. We know each other.
I think she might have left. Sorry.
She does that to me too. I'm going to start taking it personally.
Sorry, she was there a minute ago.
Okay. The cost, so you get to know all kinds of people. The cost will vary. As a single record, it's $40. But if you're an advocate, the more you purchase, the price goes down to like $5 or something. It's very reasonably priced. The second thing was you can, if you have access, this is internet based. So you can be, as long as you have connection to the internet, you can call up this report. This report is always yours. Nobody else has access to it because it's password protected. You might like to know the data are encrypted. In fact, we're going through that process again right now because we changed to the website of IEP Help because it was a lot easier to remember than Special Education Decoder System.com. I think it's a mouthful. But the beauty of it is you can look at it anywhere. You can, just like I'm doing, do this remotely. So if you're an advocate like Kerri, she doesn't, or so you don't have to run up and down the entire state. You can present this anywhere as an advocate, be at the meeting, or the parent can, or you as a parent can show it anywhere. Were there other questions to that? Kerri says she disappeared. Did I hit them all?
So if there's anybody who wants more information about Vaughn's program, you could go to his website, iephelp.com. Did I get that correct, Vaughn?
Perfectly.
And if you would like any more information about advocacy or understanding and making sense out of this testing, I saw a lot of questions about working memory. I saw a lot of questions about comprehension. That is an advocacy course. This was just a tool that Vaughn was sharing to make the test scores simpler for parents, advocates, all professionals to understand in a more systematic way. If you would like more information about anything else, please email me at kerriperez.advocate@gmail.com, and I will make sure to filter the questions to the correct people.
I have to make a terrible announcement.
Oh, no.
I do not have this recorded. When we came back on, I forgot to record it.
I think we're good. I actually clicked it on my end, so I'll take a look at that before sharing it. But
Oh,
yeah, because
you
I
did it.
saw it as an option over here, so I went ahead and did it.
I'm so proud of you and relieved. And yeah, I can. Oh, thank you, Sue.
Oh, no
And
problem.
thank you for the invitation. And
Sure.
like I said,
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to interview Vaughn. I look forward to doing more of these with Decoding Dyslexia with Sue. And if anybody is interested in something and wonder if we do have something coming in the future, send me an email. I'll get you on our list. So when we are going to do something in the future, you will get a private invitation from myself or Vaughn or Sue if there's something coming in the future.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention too, like just making sense of the numbers and the words that we hear in these child study team meetings. But you do need to be concerned of phrases like low average, because you could have a kiddo at, 85, it sounds good, but it's the bottom 16th percentile. So 94% of the kids are able to perform better. So, be a little leery of those low average and really dig down deeper. We did have some questions also on ASD and reading and writing, and I think we're still looking for the same deficiencies. If their oral reading fluency isn't accurate, if they need a writing intervention, it's still, regardless of their primary disability, we're looking at that data to show there is a need.
may I add to that, Sue?
Please
This
do.
program will not make the decision of whether a child has a disability, and it won't write an IEP for you.
Correct.
It will give you the information so that you can make an informed decision.
And put it into a way that parents can understand it where the test scores are. I love that color page where it shows you the average, the below average, and it shows a parent not necessarily it's not going to diagnose, as you said, but it's going to show strengths and weaknesses. And what you need to know for the strengths and weaknesses is there is a strength, there is a weakness. How do we get that weakness to be more of a strength? And if you're looking at dyslexia, you look at the 5 areas of reading. If you're looking at other disabilities, this is the criteria is federally, right, under IDEA, what each disability criteria is. But then the states also sometimes have a different or more elaborate way to explain the criteria. So it would be unprofessional of us to say that this test shows this disability. if you are looking for that information, we can do this in a different format. But this was just information on how to make sense that you can make the informed decision as a parent. Oh, my child has this weakness, my child has this strength. Instead of, just being presented with something that you don't know, it gives you the opportunity to see the scores as they're presented, and then you can do your research on rapid naming, oral fluency, whatever you feel it is a weakness of your child. So then you can become the best advocate for that particular deficit.
May I add just, sorry, this
Go
is
ahead.
not just for parents. Educators are not coming with degrees in psychometrics. So
That's
this is learning for them too. And they do really go, I get it now. So,
And then a teacher, right?
yeah.
School psychologist, a teacher, a principal, the person who's in charge of special education, administrators, it make them be able to see who is in those areas of weaknesses that need to be addressed.
Shannon is on today, and she mentioned in the chat that it's an excellent reporting system. I would have loved access to this when I was a special ed teacher. I had to decipher so many reports.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I wished we had created it years ago, because I'm with you.
And there was a little bit of commentary on private evals. A private OG therapist mentioned that, if you can afford it, it's always nice to get a solid neuropsych privately, which I think Pete Wright also states. So, if you can, that's great. Otherwise, it's back to advocating with the school district. And there was the commentary too, if you're not happy with it, you could disagree and get an IEE. That might be one way around getting a solid eval without expense.
Correct.
Independent educational evaluation. Thank you for your time. So contact information I typed in, I can type it in one more time. For Vaughn, you can head over to his website, which is www.iephelp.com. If you guys want to further this discussion, just let us know, and Kerri will lead that up to organize what that might look like. Her email address is kerrez.advocate@gmail.com, and you can reach me at decodedyslexiaflorida@gmail.com. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kerri.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for all attending.
Yes, this was great. Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
your expertise, Vaughn. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.